Hi, and welcome to Independent Film Festival Boston. I'm super excited to be here with you today. My name is Tess Varney, and I'm here to moderate the question and answer session for the Shorts Arlington package. Please help me in welcoming our filmmakers who are joining us for this conversation today.
Hey.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining me today. Before we hop into the questions or get into the meat of it, why don't we take a moment to let you both kind of introduce yourselves and the films, obviously, that you're a part of.
Sure. Hi, my name is Arestia Rosenberg. I'm the filmmaker from Named Crew Tiny Toons, about a former refugee and gang member who was deported back to a country he'd never been to and started a hip hop and breakdancing school for at-risk youth.
Hi, my name's Kevin Belli, and I'm the director for Music for People in Japan, a film about a high school band from the 1980s reuniting 30 years later to play a final show in Japan.
Amazing. Thank you both. And thank you both so much for bringing your films to the festival and participating in our conversation today. We're really excited about it. And I was even really enjoying the conversation we were having before we got started. So just simple to get started. How did you find the subjects of your film, and what motivated you to kind of work with them to tell these stories?
For me, I was traveling full-time. I had a digital nomad existence and was living in Cambodia at the time, and went to an event where I saw the kids of Tiny Toons performing, and I thought, oh wow, such cool dancers, and was just very moved by the NGO, and then went to the school to just, I don't know, I guess I was following instinct, I guess. And the power was out that day. So I actually ended up talking to KK and Short, who are the main subjects in my film, and was like, oh, your English is really good. And they're like, oh yeah, thanks. I said, no, it's like really good. Where did you learn? And they both said, oh, we grew up in the United States. I said, oh, that's interesting, but you like moved back to your, heritage country? And they said, well, not exactly. And I kind of got their whole story and was just blown away by it. And I went away from there and couldn't stop thinking about it for months. And that idea kind of never left me alone, and just felt like I had to tell the story and make the film.
Yeah, I loved your film. It was so good, and I love the sort of what a timely film too, considering all that's gone on in the country around immigration over the last 4 years. So to have that sort of to have that connection for the film, and to see what he's done with his time back in his home country, it was amazing. I loved it. Music for People in Japan came to me through my friend Damien, who lives in New York. In the 90s, I was in a touring band, and a band that he was in after high school, we toured with a couple of times, so we've known each other for a long time. And he called me out of the blue one day and said, hey, I know this isn't the type of documentaries you usually work on, but I had this interesting story. My high school band just got offered to reunite in Japan by some guy that we barely remember, but he's going to pay for everything. And is that something you'd be interested in? And I was like, well, yeah, I just need to know more about it, and what could this look like? And once I met the band and heard more about the story, I was inching closer to being like, yeah, this would be a worthwhile project. But it was really their archival footage that kind of sucked me in. I'm just a sucker for any, if you have archival VHS footage, I'm such a sucker for that. And I love to so the trip to Japan actually became a much smaller part, whereas I was really enjoying telling that larger part of the story, being how they met and growing up, and and how music has a way of just finding people and uniting people who maybe don't fit in with sports, the athletes at high school. And I was one of those kids where I liked sports, but I didn't get along with people who played sports. So I started playing guitar, and I found my people through music. And it's one of the things I loved about all the films in this short, is just how music just sort of we've been exposed to so much divisiveness over the last 4 years or so, and something like music is such a uniter, and it kind of it should never be anyways political and everything else. So it just I think it just sort of meets everybody at the same sort of neutral space, and just has such a huge impact in your life. So yeah, I was really interested in the story because it's also partly my story and partly a lot of people's stories from my generation. So yeah,
I was gonna say, I feel like I knew those guys. You know what I mean? Everyone knows those guys, and yeah, it was so relatable in so many ways. And like I said, I was so charmed by it. I felt like really like in the crew when I was in it, like I was in the band. It was really, and you're right, that archival footage really brought it home. It was just great that they had so much of that.
Yeah, it was really lucky they had it. And, I think going into it, I was hoping for it to be more of like this observational film about these guys navigating their way into Japan and doing this thing. And they were so great in their interviews, and they were so kind of boring in regular everyday life. Like when we were in Japan, they're just kind of like doing their like work from remotely and just like not interested in really doing much. So I really hung on those interviews a lot. And then it actually kind of worked itself out. As you know, as a filmmaker, I'm sure you know this as well, but it's like you kind of gotta, there's the film you see in your head, but then there's the film that actually exists in the footage, and you kind of just got to make it work. And so it actually ended up working out well because it gave me the avenue to tell those past stories and to dip in and out of archival and in and out of like present day. And so it all worked out. It worked out great. And they were just such good interviews that,
really great interviews.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Speaking of, so how do you both kind of approach the interview process of getting people to maybe get a little bit more vulnerable, more comfortable as you're going through this process with them?
I mean, for me, truthfully, I'm not sure I would have pursued the film if I didn't know that they were good talkers. I mean, KK really is such a great just subject. Like his story is incredible, but he's so good. So I knew that at least I would have that. And I mean, I interviewed him, this poor man, I interviewed him for like 5 hours, so it was such a good, and it's hot in Cambodia. So he was a really, really good sport about it. But I just really, I of course I'm prepared, I have questions going in, but I really do try to make it a conversation and let that dictate, where I go. And only maybe when I think it's the end, will I go back and look down and be like, did I ask everything I wanted to? I think I got to everything. So I really try to be prepared, but not let it inform. And I also talked to KK and Short before then via Zoom and Skype before I got in a plane. So, I really wanted them to trust me. I really believe in their organization and, wanted to help it, but also was like, I'm not here to make an NGO film. I really want to make something that will appeal to an audience that hasn't been exposed to you before. Because they've had plenty of, fundraising things and things like that. So, I really wanted them to get what I was doing. And I think they really appreciated that I wasn't, I really wanted them to understand what I was going in with. So I think that trust there was essential.
Mm. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, I think it's become, even harder, I think, as documentaries get more and more popular around the world, like access, especially to people from different cultures, gets a little bit more difficult because I think there's less of a trust or there's more awareness of where these things end up. Yeah. So I was going to ask you about that initial ask and how that went and what was your approach for asking Kiki about, the possibility of filming.
Yeah. And they had a lot of questions for me and they asked to see my work samples. I think, again, they were and should be it's children also we're talking about. So they have to be very protective and they should be very protective. So, I was just very transparent about, that I wanted to make this film because I think it's a great story. And, that's what I can do for them and, see if we can maybe get that story out to a larger group of people. So I think they really got it. And I think that approach matters, especially for film subjects. I think I say that I always feel like it's a privilege when someone lets you into their world like that. They don't really know what that final story is going to look like or how I'm going to quote, make them look or whatever. So I think that trust is really important. Yeah. And probably with your guys, they knew you, that you were their friends, right? So
Yeah. For me, it was easy because, my history as more of a cinematographer and editor on other people's films, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I worked on a film that was actually here at I think it was at IFFB, What Tomorrow Brings, which was about girls going to Afghanistan. So I filmed in Iraq and Syria and, all over the Middle East. And there's always been that trust factor of like, and a little bit of the like, oh man, is this a story I should be telling? Is this like, so I've always had that part of filmmaking as part of the mix of like what I've had to deal with. So for me, this was like such a different and kind of like fun piece to do, because there was none of that. It's just like, oh, these are just a bunch of idiot guys my age who are just like, like have still enjoying playing music and still having this like so there's none of that stuff to get over to like gain the trust or any of that. It was just so it was a very different experience.
But they were such good interview subjects. I mean, did you?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's just who they are, or if your relationship, but they really were.
I actually think Damien, Damien, the guitar player, the guy in New York, is the only one I knew well before doing the interview. I wanted to do the interview. I did the interviews like right away, like before I really got a chance to hang out with them. So the first time I met Andy was his interview. First time I met Tyler was his interview. Rob, I did his after Japan because he was out in San Francisco, so that took a little longer to get it. But I think that helped some of the, like, I think if they already knew that I knew the whole story and vice versa, I think there would have been less of that. Especially Andy, the bass player, who was just so great in his interview. I don't think it would have been to that extent had we already had a previous, relationship. It really like lent itself, by not knowing each other and feeling each other out during the interview. It really lent itself to like this very exuberant, sort of fun, like, interview. So it was cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't know are we going to talk about the other films too? Because man, I have so many questions too about, I think it was Let the Blondes Sing was so interesting to me because
that Alaska footage, I mean,
yeah.
You feel isolation in that film.
You feel the isolation, and I filmed once out in the Bering Strait, out in Breivik Mission, Alaska, and that desolate, how desolate it is like, it's real. But I just have so many questions about that film because, like, they had such a hard job of trying to tell her backstories, but using current day footage and using this bar and the scant number of people hanging out, and it's just really awesome, immersive, sort of like also very lonely, and I don't know. I just had a mix of emotions watching it.
I thought they did a really good job. I actually, not to bring it back to my phone, but I had a hard time. So KK's family didn't return my phone calls. They still live in Long Beach. Like I actually had a really hard time with the archival, trying to tell a backstory. My editor will tell you the same. I mean, we tried a lot of different things. So I actually noticed that, because I was like, man, they did such a good job of that. And, all I could do was go down to Long Beach and film Cambodia town, which it also isn't much to see. And I had one photo of KK as a child, which you see in it. And that was it. He didn't have anything, and his parents were, they still don't speak English and are very wary as well. So, yeah.
Well, I think you guys did an amazing job editing them, because in my brain, I feel like you did a great job with archival. I felt like I saw more than one photograph. I felt like
Short had one photograph of him from high school. Like,
yeah.
Right. He went to jail at 17. So, he, but they were deported. So they didn't, it's not like they
didn't have anything.
Had a lot of that stuff. Yeah. So I was expecting going in filming that I would have this rich ground of photos from their families, and it was not the case.
Well, you guys did an amazing job then, because I didn't feel that at all.
But but same with her. She had that, one poster, just like a couple things. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was really cool. It was, really beautiful footage. I was like, oh man, I wonder if this film director, used to do Nat Geo stuff and found their way up there.
Oh, in Alaska?
The story. Yeah. Or I was curious how she found the story. So.
Yeah. And Crescendo too, not to dismiss Crescendo, but man, that was like, especially to be the first film in the block.
Yeah.
Such an emotionally beautiful. There's a moment in Music for People in Japan where Andy talks about how he was bullied in Ohio, and when he came to Connecticut and he could start fresh, how he was taken under the wing of these these wacky musician guys. And I love that, because I knew people like that who dealt with bullying and this and that. And I watched Crescendo, I'm like, oh man, that has nothing on what this guy's been like, his story of just how he was treated, and then to where he's ended up, it's unbelievable. So just I mean, what a way to start the whole block. I was like, damn, this is
That's great. Really,
yeah, fantastic.
really moving.
There was really a kind of a beautiful, and credit to Nancy for always finding the themes across films. And obviously there's the obvious theme of music here, but there was also kind of that theme of kind of identity and performance embedded in each of your films that I think really brought them to life.
I think, kind of, beating, what is that phrase? Beating your own drum, I think everyone kind of finds their way through these rocky kind of experiences. I really felt for those guys, man, when they talked about in your film, Kevin, like the second and third shows just being terrible. I was like, oh man, that was rough watching that footage.
The reason why I love that is because everyone's played those horrible shows.
Horrible. I know. I was like, this is bad. I like
no one cares.
Yeah.
And I think we've probably all been at those shows where you're like, you go to see a friend's band and you're just like,
you're trying to support it. You're like, I'm going to be the only jerk that's standing up here, man.
Yeah. So it's just great that it's documented that they were, so yeah. Oh man.
They were so humorous, though, even in their retelling of this traumatic show and talking through it. They were really kind of like, I think, comfortable with it all these years later and reliving that. How nervous were they going into Japan? Like, you were there with them versus the footage you showed. Like, how nervous were they about maybe having a repeat of those shows?
The funny thing is they weren't nervous at all because they all, I mean, Tyler and Andy had a band that was like pretty big at one point. Damien was actually signed to a Japanese label at one point. He had an album come out in Japan. Cool. All these things I try to work in, but I'm like, good Lord, it's already 23 minutes. This is like, I got to get it. I was trying to get it really like down. So they weren't nervous. The biggest thing was there was a lot of like, kind of like funny, humorous bickering back and forth because Damien and Andy really didn't want to do the same song list from 1990. They're like, these songs suck. Why are we playing the same song list? And Tyler was just adamant that like, no, we have to play the same songs. But I couldn't work it in. So it wasn't so much nerves. It's more just like, why are we doing these dumb songs like 30 years later? Let's just do a new set list, Let's do new songs, anything. So that was that was kind of funny. I just couldn't work it in. It was too much to work in. So I just focused it on just the journey and the reunion and, So,
was there anything else that you would have wanted to include it if it allowed or if you felt?
I think
a bigger story.
Not really. I think everything that made it in was exactly what the film needed to be. Everything else just felt extraneous, and like there's some funny stuff when Damien goes through their old cassette tapes that were just like ridiculous, and but I did a lot of cutting out. I think at one point it was like 31 minutes and I just kept cutting and cutting. And even then it's still too long really for festivals. I'm fortunate that IFFB took it on, but 23 minutes is not. Yeah. You know how it is. It's like everyone tells you like under 15, 12 if you can. It's hard sometimes. You just like, to be fair to yourself as a filmmaker, you just got to make the film the length it needs to be and then just hope for the best, Yeah. I'm sure. How long was yours, Aristea?
I mean, my paper cut, so to speak, was like 52 minutes. We got it. I felt like we got it probably till around like 23 where I was like, this is tight. We can't do anything else. And I really had some things off that made me sad, but I had really, my executive producer is Daniel Youngie, who has won an Academy Award for short. So he was really good and adamant about really sticking to like, what is the story I'm trying to tell, and like unwrap that present, and anything else, as much as I wanted it in that was interesting, that was good. I do feel like I killed darlings. And even at 16, I was like, I really would like for this to be shorter, but I was like, I can't see anywhere else, and with this too, like also with how my subjects talk in their interviews, there's a lot of slang and stuff. Like I had to have them say it how they said it. And I couldn't, especially also with the Khmer, with my translator. It's like, okay, if I were to put it together like this, does it still make sense?
Yeah.
So it was a challenge, and I would have liked to have been shorter, but I'm happy with where we ended up.
It didn't feel like even 16.
Okay,
If it went by, it was really well just like executed.
We try to keep it as tight as possible. But.
Yeah. No, it flowed so well, and great use of music and great use of scenics and everything. And you just had really compelling protagonists. It was just, they were great on camera, so likable, which, going back to like some of my traveling and stuff, any film that sheds light on other cultures that, for a country that has so much influence in the world, we're still so naive and about, was it like 15% of U.S. citizens have a passport, so we're still very like.
Well, your subjects included.
yeah. So exactly, Tyler. But so anything that like paints like a human face on without being an issue film, it almost feels like an issue film. I just really loved it. It just hit all the right tones, like for all of that, without trying to beat anyone over the head or anything. It was just like a beautiful story with little hints of these bigger things.
I mean, and that's what ended up on the cutting room floor, truthfully. I definitely wanted to like people to feel like they were in Cambodia, because it's not a place a lot of people have been. Like I wanted to give a sense of place. That was really important. But there was a lot about that I wanted to explain about like the Pol Pot regime and like what that was like. And, how many, there's like over 700 of these guys like KK and Short that have these similar stories where they were born in refugee camps, not even Cambodia, but were deported back. And, all these, which as you mentioned, and, something that I care about is like the immigration story. I mean, that's, one of the big themes in this, but I of course wanted to talk about that more and get into all of those things, but I just had to keep it moving.
But it reads so well.
Yeah.
Like it really comes through, and it's like, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It's still, anytime I tell the story to people, everyone's like, wait, what? I have to kind of explain like, no, he wasn't born there.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Man.
Did either of you think about making feature-length films with your kind of topic areas? Hard no from Kevin.
I mean, sure, I would have liked to, but I mean, truthfully, the reality is like, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any resources. And, I probably could have found them. I'm not saying I couldn't have, but I just, in my heart, when I went out and started, I was like, this is a short,
Yeah. I mean, I love shorts because.
Me too.
I mean, I'm right now cutting a fundraising trailer for a feature that I started shooting in 2004. So documentaries can just go forever. In shorts, especially during COVID, it was great because I already had this one shot. So it was great to just kick back in COVID and be like, well,
that's
not a lot going on. I think I'll just cut this film. And so it was, it was kind of great for that. But yeah, I knew right from the beginning, there's no feature because there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no like big problem. There's no big issue. It's just like a very simple. So I knew it was gonna be short, from the beginning.
And it's an exciting time for shorts. There's actually platforms that people are watching them on, obviously with the internet and all these media platforms. But even Netflix does a really good job. I just watched 2 great Netflix shorts on Netflix the other day. So it's cool. It's cool to see shorts kind of get their moment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like normally I have to wait every year for the festival or for kind of award circuits to kind of make them available. It's really nice to see this kind of larger availability be made for kind of a broader audience. You may not have a festival where you live or have access to be able to go to these kinds of things. So it's really wonderful. You both started talking a little bit about kind of your editing process and, you're thinking through that. What was your music editing process? Obviously, with music being such a big factor in each of the shorts.
Yeah, Kevin, go ahead. You can take that one first.
Oh, mine was, well, I always make this huge mistake as an editor of, I fall in love with my scratch music. I do it all the time. So like, so you find this music and you go through all these series of edits and you have all these different versions of cuts. And then at some point you're like, oh, okay, right. We have to replace this music. And that initial time of having to hear new music with these scenes that you've become so familiar with other music is always like a hard leap. but I worked with a local composer. I'm based here in Somerville. So I worked with a local composer named Joel Roston, who's a friend of mine. And it was a little tough in the very beginning because it's hard to get past that scratch music phase, you know. But once we got past it, and he just really he did an amazing job of just of finding, kind of getting at the tone that I was getting at with the scratch music, but also bringing his own personality to it. And really all the 80s sort of like synth sounds he put in there, I really loved. I love that he like kind of he kind of like, you know, brought in some sounds that gave it a little bit of that, like, you know, like I said, 80s feel a little bit, you know. Like he just little instrumentation here and there that just works so well. So I thought he did a great job, and I thought he really nailed it emotionally as well.
I love that opening track. I was actually noticing it when your film started. I thought, oh, this music's really good. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and the scratch music I used was a local guy, John Kuziak. It was music from, I used a lot of music from that film, Tabloid, the Errol Morris film.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, and Joel has a relationship with John, so he's like, man, don't make me like imitate John Kuziak's music. It's like, come on. He's like, he's local. He's like, I've worked with him. I'm like, no, don't imitate it. Just the feel of it, you know. What about you? What about the music for yours?
Well, I mean, before I shot, went into it and knew Alex Formosa was going to do my music. He had done the music for a film I did when I was at the Daily Beast, just an online film that we did. And he's a Canadian guy that lives in Vietnam. So, you know, he and has been to Cambodia a lot. So, I thought that he would be great. And he was really inspired by the story. He, you know, did the work for practically nothing. So that was really great. And so, you know, I knew going in that he was going to do it. But then when I got to Tiny Toons and, you know, started filming, Short said, oh, you know, we have, because part of their curriculum is like DJing. And so a lot of them are rappers and things like that. Actually, this film premiered in Cambodia. It was the only film festival I got to go to.
That's awesome. Where in Cambodia?
In Phnom Penh.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's where it premiered, and like Tiny Toons came and had like these two female rappers perform to like open it. It was awesome. So they have that curriculum. He's like, you know, we have like tracks that the students have done. Like, do you want it? And I was like, yes, I want it. And so you know, there's a few tracks from Tiny Toons in the film, and they were great, like that opening track. And
that's so cool.
A bunch to choose from. So while we were editing, we at least had real music that we knew we wanted, and then put in scratch that Alex then helped compose with. So yeah, it turned out great. I really think the Tiny Toons music adds quite a bit. You got this Khmer rap in there that, I mean, I just think makes it. Yeah.
What was the premiere like in Phnom Penh?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was this huge, you know, the interesting and sad part about Phnom Penh is quite a lot of their filmmakers are very young, you know, because a whole generation was murdered. Of artists. So, you know, my fixer, Chendayan, who's amazing, she came to the opening party with me and she's like, oh, that's the best writer in Cambodia right now. She's 19. And I'm like, what the hell? You know, so she's like pointing out like all this great talent that I got to meet, which was really fun. And then they had the film open at this like outdoor event, so like anyone could come, which was really nice. And so KK came and a bunch of the kids came and they performed as part of like the opening, and you know, it was
so cool.
Really a fun event. I'm glad at least I got to go to one. And then literally I got home from Cambodia and went into lockdown 5 days later, so it was by the skin of my teeth.
Oh man, wow. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's phenomenal. And what timing. I'm glad that you at least got to have that experience.
I almost didn't go
to do that.
I know, but I almost like didn't get on the plane. I was like literally supposed to get on a plane in like 4 hours, like emailing the festival, being like, "Is it still happening?" Because this is Asia, you know, they were a little ahead of us but there hadn't been much COVID in Cambodia at that point. He's like, "We're doing it."
Oh, that's so great. That's so great you got that in.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So we are nearing the end of our time, sadly. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I guess I'm curious to hear from either of you, like, what's kind of coming up next for you? What are you working on? What are you thinking about as you kind of move forward? And where is this film going to be available next for people to be able to see as well?
Do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. My film is coming to the end of its film festival run. It's, it's been about a year. So I'm actually really excited for people to watch it here. And I've definitely let people know, like, hey, this might be the last film festival run. I am working on distribution. I would love for it to find a home. So if anyone's watching this and would like to purchase it, please call me. Because I think I would really like it to see a larger platform and to get more exposure for Tiny Toons, which is really who the organization is really struggling right now. So, the more I can do to get people interested, that would be great. What I'm working on, the world is now coming out of COVID. I was supposed to direct something in Hawaii last spring that got shut down. And so I'm hoping that we'll start that back up again soon. So nothing active, but hoping to move into pre-pro on some things hopefully soon.
Cool. Yeah, I'm in the middle. Well, this is the first festival for this film. Yay. Hopefully there'll be a few more. My producer, Sarah Archibald, who's also somewhat local here, she's working on trying to get some sort of like distribution for it. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, I'm just happy to let it just live online at this point,
Same.
But and then, like I said, I'm working on a fundraising trailer right now. I'm co-directing a film with my friend Josh Corey, and I can't say what the film's about for legal reasons, but it's been in production for like 17 years, but it's a long story of why it's gone that long, and but we're at an exciting point with it right now. So for the first time in a long time, there's just like a lot of forward motion with it, and just getting that fundraising trailer ready to start trying to get some funding. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Exciting. Well, thank you both so much for this, both for bringing your films and to the other filmmakers who weren't able to join us today for bringing their films as well. But it was really just a phenomenal conversation. And for anybody who's watching this who hasn't watched the movies yet, you do have through the end of the festival to be able to enjoy these shorts either again or newly if you haven't had an opportunity to watch them. But thank you again so much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your festival.
Thanks,
Chad. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Great chatting with you, Kevin.
Yeah, you as well.
Thanks, guys.